And let's jump into John chapter 8. And we're only looking at one verse today, but it's a major verse. In fact, probably most of you are familiar with the saying. The context is this. We've been talking the last couple of weeks, at least I've been talking the last couple of weeks in the downstairs services, that the 11 verses right before John chapter 8, verse 12 are probably not original to John's gospel. At least they're not original to him writing them. And so when we go to John chapter 8, verse 12, what you want to do is connect it back with John chapter 7. You want to connect it back with the last day of the festival in John 7:37, when Jesus stands up on the last day of the Feast of Booths, and he says, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And this also then in John chapter 8, verse 12, is also probably going to happen on the last day of the Feast of Booths. So if you read straight through and you take those 12 verses at the end of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8, you're going to be a little confused because you're going to be like, wait, isn't this the next day? And aren't we like on the Mount of Olives and then back in the temple? And what day is it? But the real issue is that, are we getting microphone sound good here? Nah. Should we try that? Okay, hopefully that's better. You could probably hear me because I was kind of talking loud, but that's hopefully better. So we're in John chapter 8, and we are in verse 12. And we are connecting John chapter 8, verse 12 with John chapter 7, verse 37, the last day of the feast. So it's the last day of the feast. After that, you get the response of Jesus saying, come to me, all you who are thirsty. But my guess is in John chapter 8, verse 12, we're still on the last day of the festival. Now, in verse 37 in chapter 7, when it says, on the last day, the great day of the feast. The last day or the great day of the feast wouldn't necessarily be the 8th day, because the 8th day was a Sabbath day. It was a rest. When it says the last day, it's probably talking about the last day of festivaling or the last day of ceremonying. And so that's probably the 7th festival day. It's the last day of actually eating and celebrating. It's the last day of the different festivals that they would have added in or been a part of. So we talked heavily, not last week, not the week before, but the week before that, when Jesus said, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. We talked about the water pouring ceremony that happens during the Feast of Booths. We did a whole illustration in the worship center, so if you didn't get a chance to see that, go back and look at it. That was one of the extra festivals that the Jews did during the Feast of Booths. But to understand John chapter 8, verse 12, you have to understand another festival that they did during the Feast of Booths. So there's a water pouring ceremony. That was important to what Jesus said in John 7:37. There's also what's called the ceremony of lights, and that also happened during the Feast of Booths. Now, whether it happened every day or not, I'm not sure. It might have only happened on the evening of the first night, and then the candles that they would have lit would have been lit for the whole duration of the 7-day ceremony or 8-day ceremony. So I'm not sure that this happened every single night, but for sure when Jesus said it on the last day of the festival, this candle, this beacon would have still been lit, and so it's still helpful for us to understand. So here's how the ceremony of lights went. You won't find this in your Old Testament because it was an additional festival that the Jews were celebrating as a part of the Festival of Booths. So they were celebrating this little ceremony as a part of the festival. They added it. You won't find it in your Old Testament, but it was happening when Jesus was there. So the ceremony of lights. So they would gather in the court of women. So if there's an outer court like this, it's big, the whole outer court. That's where the Gentiles can go. Then in the middle, there's a smaller court. And half of that court would be split into what's called the court of women. And then the other half would be the court of the Jews, which is where the priests would go to offer sacrifices, and only the priests were allowed. And then inside that half court would be the actual temple area where you have the holy place and then the most holy place. So it's like big and then section, and then half is the court of women, and then half is the court of Jews, and then you have that split even into two spots where only the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies. So where we're at is the court of the women, and everybody would come. Gentiles were not allowed. This was Jews only. And they would come into the court of women, This is also where the treasury boxes were held. So if you wanted to go into the temple and you wanted to see who was giving what to the temple fund, this is where the treasury boxes would be held. So in the court of women, there's 4 lampstands, one on each corner, like this. There's 4 lampstands, and they're huge. They're, let's see, 86 foot high. That's almost 9 stories high. And the purpose of that was so that they would go over the walls of the inner court. So there's a Gentile court out here, and then there's lampstands that reach over the walls of the inner court where the court of women is. So 4 lampstands. Now, they either did this every night, or for sure they did it on the first night and then just left them burning the whole time. They would pick a young priest. Got to have a young priest, because he's got to climb a ladder 9 stories high. Not a metal ladder, probably a wooden ladder. And he's got to do it with 10 gallons of oil on his back. So he throws 10 gallons of oil on his back. And then they also said that they would use the priestly garments as the wick. So he would have priestly robes on one side, 10 gallons of oil on the other side, and he would climb 9 stories up this pillar, and he would throw the priestly garment in there, and then he would dump the oil in there. Meanwhile, you're holding onto a ladder, trying not to fall 10 stories to your death. And then he would climb back down, and they would do that on 4 different pillars. My guess is they probably only did this once, because 10 gallons of oil is a lot. It would burn the whole time. And the point was, the festival goes throughout the day when it's light, but the festival also continues on into the night. And so they would light these huge candles in the middle of in the corners of the court of women, and they would essentially give light to the whole temple courtyard area for the duration of the festival, so that they could continue festivaling even at night. Super cool thing that they did. So that's what you would see. So the last day of the festival, the greatest day, Jesus has just stood up, probably sometime around the water pouring ceremony, and said, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me. And then there's this, people know what he's saying. There's this interaction where the Pharisees are like, why haven't you arrested this guy yet? He's saying he's God. This is insane. What's wrong with you guys? Then on the same day, probably sometime in the evening, my guess, it would make this illustration make the most sense. Jesus says this in John chapter 8, verse 12. Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So they've been going through this festival 7 days, and they've had these massive burning pillars to basically light the entire courtyard area of the temple. And Jesus is looking at those lights, and he's looking at everybody festivaling, and when he stands up, he says, I am the light of the world. So this is the second of the metaphorical I am statements in the book of John. The first one was I am the bread of life. He said that to the Galileans in the wilderness up north from Jerusalem. Now he's saying, I am the light of the world, and he's saying this in the presence of the Jews. So first I am statement to the Galilean Jews, second I am statement to the Judean Jews in Jerusalem. Now, what was the purpose of the lights? Why did the Jews add this ceremony as a part of the Feast of Booths? So, if you know your Feast of Booths, you know that the Feast of Booths is to celebrate the Jews wandering in the wilderness, and they would set up their booths, and then they would take them down, and they would move to the next place 40 years, and then they would set up their booths, and they would stay, and then they would take them down. They're also called tabernacles or tents, and this is what would happen. And how did the Jews get along by night? The answer is they followed a pillar of fire at night. They followed the pillar of smoke through the wilderness by day and a pillar of fire by night, which is why the Jews added this ceremony to this festival. So it's literally representing the pillar of fire that God led them through the wilderness, and they're lighting these pillars in the middle of the court of the women during this festival so that the people might remember that God, the presence of God, literally led the people through the wilderness as a pillar of fire. And so they lit these 4 pillars. Do you get it yet? Let me read it to you again. Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The illustration has multiple levels. The illustration has, what was it what was Jesus saying as far as the representation of the presence of God with the people of God as it happened in Moses' time? Then there's also illustration for the ceremony in the festival. So 2 things from Moses' time to think about when you're trying to unpack what is Jesus saying when he says, I am the light of the world. First thing is, the light in the wilderness led the people of God. So in Moses' day, they're just literally following a pillar of light. They've left Egypt. They're not exactly sure where they're going. The promises were not made to the people of God. The promises were made to Moses. I'm going to give you this land. The promises were made to Abraham. Abraham's gone. Like, the people are not exactly sure where are they going. They're just following a pillar of light. And so when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, he's literally telling you and I, you don't always need to know where you're going. You don't always need to know the land that I'm taking you to. You don't always need to understand and see the end game. You just have to follow me. You just have to take one step at a time. You just have to follow the light, if you will. The people in the wilderness, some of them probably didn't have a clue where they were going. But when you're walking in the wilderness and it's pitch dark outside and there is a pillar of fire that you're going, that's not normal, and it's moving ahead of you, you just follow it because it's supernatural, and you're just going, yeah, I don't know where it's taking me, but it's pretty cool, and I've never seen anything like it, so I'm just kind of going with the flow. And that's okay for us as Christians to be like that sometimes, where we don't know the end game, don't know the land God's taking us to. We're just taking steps to follow him because he's supernatural, because it's something cool, and we're getting on board with it. And we ask God a lot of times for answers. Where are we going? What are we doing? Why am I doing this stuff? What are you preparing me for? All these sorts of things. It's like we're a little kid in the back seat going, Dad, where are we going? Dad, where are we going? Mom, where are we going? And God's just like, do you see that I'm a pillar of fire, something supernatural that you just have to follow? You may not have all the answers all the time. It's okay. The second thing is that the light shows everyone else where we are. So think about the Egyptians pursuing the Israelites in the wilderness. They let them go out of Egypt, and then Pharaoh's like, no, I don't want all my slave labor to go. Why don't you go back and get them? So he sends his armies after them. And it's like, well, how do the armies find them? You know, they're walking in the day and the night and all that stuff. And it's like, no, they found them because there was a beacon of light guiding close to 1 million people wandering from Egypt to the promised land. So how did they find them? They probably just looked up in the sky and saw the beacon, and they followed it too, and they ended up leading them to the Israelites. Here's the point. If your and my life is not a beacon for Christianity, then maybe we're not reflecting the way we're supposed to reflect. I mean, if we're in close enough proximity with the light of the world, people should know it. People should be able to look at our lives and say, even if they don't know what it is, there's something different. I mean, when I look at them, they seem like they're following after something. They don't seem chaotic or out of place. Perhaps we're not reflecting the light of the world. If people don't look at us and know that we're Christian, even if they don't recognize the light. Now, here's the difficult part. People should know that you're a Christian without being criticized by you for not being a Christian. You get that that's where people get put off, right? They have their own life and their own standards. They don't live by the Bible. They're not trying to follow Christ. We come up as righteous Christians and we're like, why are you making these decisions in your life? And they're looking at us going, who are you? Because I don't follow that God. And maybe they should be, and maybe we should try to tell them how great it is. But we have to find a way to balance people knowing that we're Christians without us expecting for them to live like us. When they don't believe the same as us, they don't have the same worldview as us, they don't follow the same Jesus as we follow. And so if we can figure out how to do that, God will take care of judging them. God will take care of illuminating their life. God will take care of showing them what's different about us so that they can become different too if they want to be. God doesn't need our help to criticize people's life. He does need us to reflect Him so that they are drawn to Him. but he doesn't need us to put them on blast for living a life that doesn't follow him. We should expect that. They're the world. They're not supposed to follow God. That's the whole point. So that's the two things from Moses, from way back. Now, two things from the festival. The first one is this. And I kind of already mentioned it. In the festival, when they lit the pillars, they lit the inner court, but they also lit the court of the Gentiles. So when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, those pillars literally lit the court of the Jews and the court of women, and it also lit the court of the Gentiles. And we saw this already. Paul talks about this in Ephesians chapter 3. When he writes a letter to the Ephesians, he says, this is the mystery that's been hidden in the ages. Hidden for ages. The mystery is that the Gentiles are included in the blessing of God for the people of God. And to Paul, who was a Pharisee, that was mind-blowing. And yet, it was important to him because he was sent to the Gentiles. So, the light, it doesn't just illuminate the Jews. The light is meant to illuminate the court of the Gentiles and the Jews. That's why the lamps go so high, so that they illuminate the whole of the temple area. And this is a blessing that's been given ever since the time of Abraham. Even God said to Abraham when he was talking about blessing the people, he said, be a blessing. And he said, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. And Jesus is saying that. I am the light of the world. Not just the Jews, I'm the light of the whole world. Same way these pillars go up and they light the whole court of the Gentiles and the whole court of the Jews. There's so many different symbolic things that are happening in these statements. This is why we're only going through one verse today. Okay, second thing from this festival, and this is where I need Jesus to help me. So we got an illustration here. So Julie, would you mind clicking that? And so the crazy thing is that the light illumines every part of our life. But I think a lot of times what happens is that we really think that this is what following Jesus is like. I'm like, hey, Jesus, thanks for coming and helping me out with this life. We're going to walk, and why don't you just illumine my path? So I'll go with you wherever you go, and you just tell me where to go.
All right, watch out. There's this little thing here.
Which way do I go?
Tiptoe around to the left.
Oh,
there.
to the left.
Tiptoe.
Yep. Ooh, on my tiptoe. Yep.
Jump over this right here.
Ha.
All right.
Okay.
All right. That's going to bite you. Stay away from that.
Ooh, I don't want that.
All right. No. Okay.
Where next?
Go now to the right.
To the right, yeah.
Watch out for the little Jesus,
Oh, there's a little Jesus doll. What?
Step on me.
Do I skip over it or like?
Skip over it twice.
Over it twice.
All right.
Yep.
Now do a little twirl.
Oh, twirl. Wait.
Come back.
What? What am I doing?
I think that's pretty good. You should be good for at least another mile here.
So here's the deal. I think that we often think that when we say Jesus is the light of the world, we think that following Jesus is like Jesus standing next to us with a headlamp on, going, turn right, turn left, do this, do that. But the real reality of walking with Jesus, would you go be the real Jesus for just a second, please? The real reality of walking with Jesus is that it illuminates our life, the whole of our life. So, the pillars of light in the festival were meant to illumine everything. They weren't just this little candle that you walk around with during the night, and if you want to do festival at night, you get a little lamp and you walk around with your lamp, and everybody has their little lamp and they see the two stones in front of them. The reality is the pillars were meant to give light to everyone and full light so that you could see the mess of your life. And the reality is when we choose to follow Jesus, this is often what happens. Our eyes get open and all of a sudden we're like, oh, when did all this stuff get here? And what am I supposed to do with it? And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So literally, you're not walking around in darkness with the Jesus headlamp. You're walking in light. You're walking in everything. Now, reality is this is not always the funnest. Because when we start getting light shine on our life, it's a mess. And we kind of look around and go, this is supposed to be better? And then it's kind of confusing because you're thinking, man, it's pretty ugly. Like, I knew there was a couple things over here, like this little thing, but I didn't realize there was like all this here. Couple things to remember. If you're thinking to yourself, I became a Christian, why am I still stumbling through life? Like, when I became a Christian, how come all these problems didn't just go away? And it's because when you became a Christian, the mess just got illuminated. It didn't go away. It didn't disappear. The lies that you told didn't automatically go away. You didn't all of a sudden stop drinking or stop self-isolating or stop self-harming or get out of that addictive pattern that you've been in. That stuff all stayed. But now you got the Spirit of God illuminating everything, and you're looking around going, oh man. It's the reason why even Christians stumble as well, because just because the lights got turned on, it didn't mean we cleaned anything up. It's still all there, unless we do something about it. Now, here's the fascinating thing and the nice thing. I don't know if you have kids or maybe young kids. My kid's not old enough to pick up after himself. He's 13, 14 months now, and so most of the time, if you go into his room after he's played, it's just like... So I go in there, and I'm teaching him how to clean everything up. But in order to teach him how to clean everything up, he puts a block away, I put a block away. He puts a monkey away, I put a monkey away. He puts a book away, I put 5 books away, because by this time I'm getting tired and we got a lot to finish. God will help you clean up the mess. He will help you. He will teach you. He will show you, this goes here, that goes there, put this over here, and he will help you order everything. But you and I have to be willing to, when the light comes, to see all the mess and go, oh man, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know how to clean up all this stuff, but if you would help me, God, we could get through it. We could put it all back together. Second thing to consider. Some people walk around, some Christians walk around and they say, why do I still feel like I don't have direction in my life? If the light of the world illumined everything in my life, how is it that I still feel like I'm not exactly sure which direction I should be going? How is it that I still don't understand where God is taking me, or what's the purpose of why he created me? I already believe in Jesus. I have the Spirit. How come I'm not figuring these things out? Let me just suggest one thing. Maybe. I don't know if this is what's happening in your life, but maybe. Maybe we're trying to follow God on a path, and he's illumined everything in our life, and we're trying to follow him to the right and to the left and backpedal a few steps and go forward. And Jesus says something like, okay, now I need you to go right. And I look right, and I'm like, ooh, no, I can't go over there. And then I just close my eyes. And as long as I'm looking this direction, I'm like, oh yeah, we can talk about any of this stuff you want. But as soon as Jesus says, the path goes right, we're like, nah, that's just too ugly. Like, God, I don't want to see that I'm a harsh and impatient person. But God, could you tell me why my kids are so messed up? Like, I don't want to deal with the fact that I'm a liar. But God, I really need friends. Like, I have no good friends. Like, I have no close friends in my life. People come and they go, and I just want someone to come and stay and be a close friend that I can share with and be vulnerable. And God's like, yeah, I want to get you there too. I would love to answer that prayer for you. But I need you to go through the pathway that takes you through the line that you've been doing for the past 20 years. And then we wander around over here in this area saying to God, where's my purpose? What's the path? How am I just feel like I'm wandering. That's because you are. Because God's trying to get you to go through the past to deal with the fact that you've been divorced, and how do you not make that happen again. He's trying to get you to go through the path that maybe is abuse in your life, but you don't want to go there. But the path to get you to where God wants you to be goes through that area. We all the time ask God, either I need more money or I need this problem to just go away. And yet we're unwilling to look at the areas of our life that He's illuminating, saying, if you would just open your eyes and walk through it with me, I'll help you. We'll get on the path to something better. Getting rid of the secrets, getting rid of the financial problems that you have, getting rid of the anger issues that you have. But if we're just unwilling to look at those parts of our life, it's not God's fault. He's illuminating everything. There may be something in our life where we've just simply closed our eyes and said, I don't want to see that. But then we pray to God as if He'll fix it for us without us doing anything. Following Jesus means that He illuminates our life. When you walk with Jesus, you will never walk in darkness. Let me read it to you again from John chapter 8. Then Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. If you're wondering where the light's taking you, you might not know. Stay on the path, just like the Israelites in the wilderness. Just follow the light. Even if you're unsure, you need to be reflecting the light of the world to the rest of the world, so that when they see they also see the pillar of fire, which is Jesus, which is God that you're following. You may feel like you're in the night. You may feel like you're depressed all the time. You may feel like there's strange sounds or shadows in your life. You may feel like you're supposed to be asleep. But when you follow Jesus, there's a pillar of light. He's illuminating everything. He's illuminating the good, the bad, and the ugly. Up to this point, I've talked to you mostly about the bad and the ugly. Try to get you to dig in, open your eyes, let God move you where He wants to move you. But the cool thing about it, and you'll find this out if you're willing to let Him show you the path, the cool thing about it is that He will also illumine your gifts, your talents, what He's equipped you for. So if you are willing to, as God illuminates your life, if you're willing to walk where He says to walk, look at the things He says to look at, go through the pathway that is the abuse in your life to get to something better, go through the pathway that is you haven't always made financial decisions that were the best, and now you got to figure that out. He will also illuminate for you along the way your gifts, your talents, the way that He created you, the purpose that He has for you, how He's going to take that junk in your life and change it and fix it and morph it into something that's a blessing and good. But if we're not willing to look at it, it's stuck. God's stuck. We can't do anything with it in that moment. Jesus is the light of the world. If you're stumbling as a Christian, ask God to help you clean up the floor. If you feel like you don't know the direction that God's taking you, either sit tight and wait patiently, or consider that the direction that God's trying to take you may be through an area of your life that up to this point you've been unwilling to deal with. And if that's the case, and you want to actually move forward and have some purpose and direction, then you got to let the light that's shining on that part of your life illumine everything. And it might be painful, and it might be dark, and it might be ugly, and it might cost you something to uncover that, but it may be the only way forward. Pray with me. God, without Jesus Christ, we're just wandering. We're just wandering in the darkness of life. And we can look around at the world and we can say, the world is wandering. They're just in darkness. It makes sense why everything's going crazy and chaotic right now. But the reality is we're no different than them. We were once wandering in the darkness before you came and illumined our whole life. So God, as we look at the rest of the world, help us to be compassionate. Help us to look at the rest of the world and remember we used to be wandering in the darkness too. And there's a great light who can help the world get out of the darkness. They might be willing, they might not be. God, help us to be reflective of the light that you are. God, I pray you'd give us boldness. Make us a people who are vulnerable enough to look at the junk in our life, not to look away or close our eyes or pretend like God's not helping us, but to take a hard look in the mirror and just say, you know what? God's been showing me this area of my life that's need to change for so long, and I've been too scared to even look. So I pray you'd fill us with your Spirit. Give us resolve and perseverance to fight through those things. Because for some of us, we're talking years of stuck, trying to figure out why you're not taking us in the direction we think we should be going. God, thank you that you light up the world to us. Many of us are not Jews or Gentiles, and we're so thankful, God, that your gospel goes to us as well. God, I pray that as you light up our life, we would become ever more submissive to you. We would know you and love you more as you walk us through each thing. Help us to remember that you're the one that guides us and teaches us and loves us. Don't let people who have never heard this story before, this background to the light of the world, don't let them miss it, because it's right there in your face. If I could have lit a big, huge candle in the middle of the church, I would have, but I can't. So God, I need you to make it real to them so that they can see that you're a beacon of hope to light up the world. And when you do it in our lives, let us be accepting of it. God, we pray all this in your Son's name, the light of the world. Amen.